origin of our digital cosmos, a pixel sparked into existence. From this primordial light, a realm was born, woven from the fabric of data and dreams. Welcome to the DCN-verse, the next monumental phase in the information space. A universe rife with opportunity and fraught with peril, where the integrity of information itself is the bedrock upon which all else stands. Here, your digital footsteps echo in an amphitheater of interconnected realities. Yet each step must be taken with caution, for the sanctity of truth and the ethics of data are perpetually at stake. In this crucible of creation and complexity, we learn, we share, we evolve. But with every byte and bit, we must ask, is this information to be trusted? How do we secure the fortresses of our collective wisdom? As the architects and inhabitants of this burgeoning frontier, we are not merely spectators, but stewards. The integrity of the metaverse hinges on our choices, our commitment to separate signal from noise. The next information space is not merely a chapter in the story of technology, but a volume in the narrative of humanity. How it's written depends on you. So let's get down to business. We're thrilled to invite you to the DCN-verse. It's our very own virtual space, built to host this conference and to give you a real taste of what the metaverse is all about. Folks, don't think this is all fun avatars and virtual landscapes. DCN-verse is a glimpse of how everything's changing. Here you'll see firsthand how we're using AI to sort out data, how blockchain is securing our digital lives, and how all these technologies are coming together under one big digital umbrella. So step in, look around, and get ready to see the future in action. Because the metaverse isn't just a playground. It's the next grand stage where all our technologies, all our innovations come to life. Welcome to Sydney at Information Integrity in the Digital Age, and to the DCN in East Asia and the Pacific inaugural event. Let's make this a milestone moment. Shall we?
Shall we? Welcome to Sydney, welcome to DCN Global. My name is Dimitris Dimitriadis, I'm a futurist and I will be your host today. And we will start with some warm-ups because I see that you didn't get enough coffee or sleep. Do we have people jet lag? Thanks? No? Everything is fine? Just Alexander? Okay, super. So, I want to start with a little bit of housekeeping. Today, you already create your avatars, you already join our DCN-verse, and for us, is not just a metaverse, it's not just a digital playground, it's the actual metaphor for all the things that will come into one. It's the convergence of the technologies, is the next frontier for the information space. So we want you, everyone, to join. You can use the chat, you can use the voice channels, you can speak to each other, you can connect, and throughout the day, we will do different activations. We will have a DCN and DCN-verse party in the metaverse, physically and digitally. And of course, we will do a lot of dancing and clapping in the metaverse as avatars, because your avatar can be your actual self. You can be really true in the metaverse. But because I see that you are a bit slow, stand up, stand up. We will have a lot of these things with me. I will meet you throughout the day. Can we have some music? Louder? Come Now that you are let's give a huge applause and welcome President of the DCN, Nico Byron. Thank you. I have never imagined myself that I would make such an entry with a song from my age, actually. And the second thing that I would like to state is that I couldn't resist the temptation as a Greek to mention that metaverse is actually a Greek word. So welcome everyone. We are more than happy and excited to be here with you, and we are more than happy and excited to be honored from the presence of the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, Mrs. Elizabeth Malin. Elizabeth, thank you very much for being with us and supporting DCN in every step that we make. Actually, the Undersecretary, she has served before us the Assistant Secretary of Global Public Affairs since September 13 of 2021, before she has taken her new role on April 2022. We have been more than happy to be with us in Costa Rica in the launch of this chapter in Americas, and we're more than happy to have her with us here in Australia. Most importantly, because the Undersecretary is someone that actually is an expert on issues of strategic communication, public diplomacy, but most importantly, in opening new pathways. This is how actually she worked in 2022. She served as a Vice President Kamala Harris Communication Director on the Biden-Harris presidential campaign. While during her White House tenure, Liz drove communication planning around the president's priorities, domestic and foreign policies, as well as legislative and outreach strategy. Liz, for her public service, extends to the U.S. Department of State, where she served actually as a Director of Public Affairs for Educational and Cultural Affairs, to whom we actually would like also to thank. This event, it is made due to the generous support and continued support, work learning, and most importantly, State Department Educational and Exchanges Office, whom we really would like to thank. I couldn't finish my speech without mentioning that Liz is actually a proud papa. And from New York, native and graduated magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa with a degree in political science and a minor in sociology from the State University of New York, Sunny College at Geneva. Liz, Undersecretary, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Nikos, my friend, for that very kind introduction. It's always humbling to have a little bit of your bio and your history read to you. But my journey has indeed taken me from where I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I've lived in Washington, D.C. for about 20 years, and it was really, really important to me to come here today to Sydney to launch the DCN in East Asia and Pacific. We think so much about these topics and this work in Washington, and I'm so glad to be here with all of you today who are at the tip of the spear of the issues that we will talk about here. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and to also pay my respects to elders, past and present. It is very nice to see some familiar faces here from across the region, including alumni of some of our U.S. government exchange programs. How many of you are Waisili alumni? Great, it's so good to see you. It's also really great to see the DCN board, my friends and partners in this critical work, where I did have the pleasure of helping launch DCN in the Americas and Costa Rica just last year. As Secretary of State Tony Blinken has laid out in a recent speech, we are at an inflection point in history. His vision, our collective vision, is a universal one, ensuring a free, open, secure, and prosperous world. So how do we get there? As communicators, storytellers, creatives, and reporters, let's take a look a little bit this morning at the parameters we're operating under, and then let's talk about solutions. The information space, as evidenced by the video this morning, has dramatically transformed in the past few years. It is definitively a contested theater of competition and manipulation. Both state and non-state actors can easily and effectively sow false narratives with malign intention, reaching audiences across the world. And we all know that it is more difficult than ever for publics to detect what is true and not true. I have heard from journalists throughout the Pacific who feel pressure from their newsrooms or from their governments to give up on investigative stories that shed light on government wrongdoing or that put forward narratives that don't align with their government's narratives. We know that some outlets just reprint both home and foreign government publications word for word without commentary on source or analysis. And we know we are also facing a structural issue where media platforms' business models incentivize profit, allowing malign influence and malign actors to pay for influence. In addition, as we all know and we're grappling with, closed networks like Signal, Telegram, and WhatsApp cause disinformation to spread unchecked, particularly when it comes from trusted sources and contacts in those text networks. So, disinformation is here to stay, and as will be discussed over the next 2 days, we know that artificial intelligence will only stand to make the problem worse and more complicated. So to those in this room working in the media space or to anyone else who values democracy, freedom, and openness, these challenges are daunting. But we are not here today to talk about doom and gloom. We are here today to talk about solutions and what we can all do together. We are here to work across borders, sectors, social and generational divides, and build a better future together as a DCN. That is where you all come in. All of you, including those of you watching on the live stream, who we'd all like to say hello to as well. We are here in Sydney to celebrate the launch of the DCN in East Asia and Pacific, which now expands the DCN network from Europe, from the Americas, and from Africa, where DCN is set to relaunch just next month. And today, just as I felt in Costa Rica, I am struck by the tremendous power of a group of people that they have when we come together in the face of enormous challenge. So let me offer you a bit of a metaphor for how we're thinking about the information space and how you, as the Digital Communications Network, can address all of these structural challenges at the same time. If we think about the information space as a wild, unruly garden, we can ensure that it grows correctly if we weed it, tend it, and cultivate it. So first, something this group is very good at, weeding out misinformation and disinformation. A high prevalence of mis and disinformation, whether it's about public health, climate change, acts of war, voting, human rights, or racism, makes it harder for citizens to make informed decisions. It increases political polarization and poisons public dialogue with distractions and falsehoods. This is the urgency of the moment that we are all called to and why you are all here today. It means that we must answer it with the truth. The DCN is now a 10,000 person strong network dedicated to empowering a new generation of global voices to find the creative solutions to combat misinformation, disinformation, and malign influence. You all are ensuring that people around the world can access accurate and fact-based information. So keep up your reading. We all know that we'd love to stand here today and say that truthful information is a good enough solution to weeding out mis and disinformation, but we know that's not true. So, in addition to weeding, it brings us to the second thing we must do in our information space garden, and that is tend to the garden. What I mean by tend to the garden is work on the actual environment in which information is spreading and thriving. We have to actually tend to the ecosystem in which these narratives spread. That means that we need to work together to develop audience resilience and digital literacy so that investigative journalism and objective storytelling can thrive. We need to help viewers, readers, and listeners gain the knowledge and skills to assess and understand the source and integrity of information so that they can be responsible information consumers. As I like to say, there's so much focus on the output of content and the output of messaging that we have to pay more attention to the reception of that content and the reception of those narratives. On our end, the U.S. government is creating momentum by investing in initiatives such as the Media Freedom Coalition, which strengthens protections for journalists and independent media, skill-building tech camps for journalists like the one we had here right in Sydney last year, and providing journalists in the Pacific, Asia, and South America with free access to international wire services like AP and AFP. We know we are facing a structural challenge where other actors seek to spread their propaganda in media markets that either can't afford or aren't sophisticated enough to do investigative journalism objectively, and we can work at getting content into areas from worldwide sources. We're certainly trying to do that. The Biden-Harris administration has emphasized the United States' long-standing support for freedom of the press and freedom of expression, and we are committed to building an information space that is resilient, healthy, and credible. As Secretary Lincoln has noted previously, quote, information is a public good, crucial to everything we do, every decision that we make. Which brings me to the third thing we can do in our information garden, which is cultivate our relationships that are going to make it healthier in the longer term. One thing I've observed during my time as Undersecretary of State is we talk so much about relationships leading and shaping the future of our world. But my strong view and the focus of our work is making sure that we aren't just building relationships government to government. We're building relationships people to people. It's all of you. It's relationships between communities in cities, in countries, in regions, and continents across the world that are ultimately going to withstand whatever government transitions happen and build a better world. So today's event brings that new model of partnership to Asia and the Pacific Islands, a tried and tested model that has proven to be successful over the past 8 years, growing from a concept to a global network of over 10,000 contributors. The DCN is a modern, nimble network. It works across borders to protect civil society, free speech, and media freedom all over the world, including, very proudly, thanks to all of you, in Asia and the Pacific. So on behalf of the Department of State and the U.S. government, we look forward to supporting the DCN's growth and moreover to supporting you in your efforts to support information integrity throughout the region. I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn, and looking forward to meeting some of you later today because it's your creative solutions and your initiatives that are going to drive progress. So as you all decide the direction that the DCN is going to take in Asia and the Pacific, the State Department looks forward to being your partner. We can do that by providing content, using our convening power to gather you, plugging you into our existing programs, identifying resources to fund your specific opportunity, and listening to what else you need to do your work that we view as so important. It is my sincere hope that you use this launch event today and tomorrow to its fullest potential. Talk to each other. Talk about how you can multiply each other's efforts. Talk about how you can form new partnerships and advance your platforms. In closing, I'd like to offer a very special thank you to the DCN board. Many of you are here today. You have a tireless dedication to making the DCN a truly global partnership, and I am so grateful to be your partner. To all of our speakers, and to all of you here in person or participating virtually, thank you for being here. Thank you for being dedicated to this work. I encourage you to harness all that these 2 days represent and that the DCN represents, and I wish you all a great launch event. Congratulations to the DCN.
So I will start by underlining what the Undersecretary has just mentioned. In the question what DCN is, the answer is you. It is a professional organization, but its power lies actually in the community, to you. I would like to introduce Frank Villacosta, which is the Vice President and actually driving the force from DCN all these years.
Thank you, Nikos. I'm not the driving force, but I was the one who basically was inspired by the CN idea from the very beginning. DCN primarily is about people. Yes, technology are important, space, reverse avatar. All these are tools. But people who are behind DCN are more precious. These people are also you. You're also members of our family from today and hopefully forever. So welcome on board. Dear friends, everything started in 2016. Started with a group of people who were invited to visit the United States. So we were from South Europe, we were in different newsrooms, organizations in Washington, meaningful stuff, cool things in our own countries. Because each of us, we are from different society with different professional background, challenging different topics. But we realized not only that we can borrow something cool from American organizations, but also we can something to share with. And in some point, especially in terms of journalism, in terms of use of technology, I can dictatorial regimes like myself, we were even cooler than some of these organizations we have visited in the United States. And that inspired us to create a network, not only to borrow things, to scale cool stuff, but also to spread the word and to let other societies, other people, other influencers around the world to be successful. And DCN has grown from a group of visitors to the United States and the network first in Europe and around the world, and now we're members of this network. We challenge different times and we challenge different problems in the world of technology. In 2016, it was still Web 2.0, and it is obsolete changing, just to confirm. And we were speaking also about information propaganda, but it was mostly about fake news on the websites. Then we were the first who predicted the rise of TikTok, basically, when no one knew about the TikTok appearance and which threats, but also opportunities it brings to freedom fighters, to journalists, to technology makers. And now we are trying to adopt the newest of the technologies, something that is called Web 3.0, AI, ML, metaverses, and we want always to be on the shape, on the edge of the changes, and not only to adapt them, but also to inform and to alert if something is happening in the world. And our countries, there are people from Tonga, Samoa, from New Zealand here, and people from Romania or Greece, then there are not so many things that unite us, with a very different context and cultures. But technology, information, thirst for truth, this is something that connects us all. And I think this community, this young family, is something where we can develop this thirst for freedom, thirst for truth and for justice together. I know that I'm speaking too long, but Nika said that we have more time than expected. Myself, everyone can take time, because we like to talk, but we also want to listen. In 2005, it was my first experiment. I'm from freedom fighters family. I'm from Belarus, the country which is living under dictatorship for 30 years. And all my childhood is spent with my father in prison. And, I remember my first experiment with technologies was 2006, when no media intelligence existed, no newspapers allowed, and we established at one bus stop in Minsk, capital of Belarus, with a Bluetooth hotspot. And every person who was just coming to this bus stop, they were receiving the message from Bluetooth software. We want to receive the fresh news. And we were just like agent there giving some information, able to explain what's happening in the country. And of course, this Bluetooth was destroyed after 2 days by police. And I was 17 years old. I spent beautiful 12 hours in KGB. But since then, I realized that if we are creative, then we can do a lot. And since then, of course, many things have changed. Dictatorships also learn how to use the technologies, and they unite in the coalition to fight freedom lovers, technology lovers, journalists, activists, human rights defenders. And we should unite to confront them and to confront this evil. Technology are not the silver bullet. All technologies are dual use. They can be used for good and for bad. And here in East Asia, in this region of the world, Australia and Pacific, we also challenge a lot of attempts of dictators, authoritarian regimes, bad guys to take over even technology. And we here at DCM, we should confront them with truth, confront them with energy, with creativity. We should not let truth down. We should be together and we should be on the front line. Thank you so much.
So actually, Pranav described what DCN is about and what we are working on. The second question is the most important question: what you can do actually, and how you can actually be part of this network that expands here. The answer is the following. DCN Global, it is actually the network that works a lot around digital technology, digital trends. This is why we are the first ones that we experiment actually in the metaverse and trying actually to bring it into life through this major event. So DCN is about understanding technologies, exploiting and using technologies for social good. DCN is the place actually where you can contribute with your ideas, but most importantly, build upon the network that you have created through participating in other programs, like exchanges, funding projects, etc. So DCN, it is actually this type of place where expertise meets enthusiasm. This is what we're doing. This is how we manage actually to be beforehand and underline the importance and the power of social media, as TikTok Kanak mentioned, even at a time when no one paid attention at that time. We were the ones actually during the COVID-19 that we immediately went online and introduced every month 3 webinars regarding critical issues. We are the ones that we actually launched and implemented a digital influencers map in order to know who are the ones that they have the power or influence or motivate people. We are the ones that actually worked a lot on the youth media of the country. But most importantly, we are the ones that it is based on you, and this is why we would welcome you on board, and we are looking forward to have your ideas, creativity, but most importantly, your support in order to be able to continue this important work. In our case, it's not the numbers that they count. In our case, what it matters and what it unites us, it is professionalism under a joint motivation to work for specific issues that aims to bring change. Change in societal level, change in a technology level, but most importantly, change in how we are represented and how our voice has been heard. This is why we have launched a very critical and pivotal campaign, Humans for Ukraine, that have managed to attract the attention of major news media outlets, because we brought to the forefront human stories, how people that they were suffering witnessed war. And this is why this have happened immediately on the first days of the invasion. And this is why we are proud of and very thankful for having your support. But most importantly, we are thankful to our people. And this is why we couldn't go without praising those that they are online with us. More than 400 people have been registered and they are following us online. That proves the power of the network. But most importantly are the people that they are with us. I will just mention them. It is Diana Filimon, it is Mariana Tanaya, it is Alexander from Brazil as well. It is all Dimitris as well, Dimitriadis, as well as Anna Tadekosyan and the whole group that we have worked a very powerful. I would like to thank each of them that they worked very hard in order to produce this event. But I couldn't actually go, I said that before, but I have to repeat this, without mentioning Vladimir Spencer. Vladimir, thank you very much for all your support and your work that you have done. Please, a big applause for Vladimir.
And I will continue with the program and ask you to stand up again. Stand up, don't be shy. Do you know what this device is? Of course. Do you have one? Okay. Take it in your hands. And Anna, can I have the Slido? We are using throughout the conference, this is a giant QR code. You can take pictures of me with this giant QR code, but you also. And the first question is, where are you from? So we are going to create a word cloud, okay, from all the. So start joining. Yeah, we need to. You can vibe also with the music. Okay. Malaysia, Vietnam, Georgia, Cambodia, Laos, Brunei, Indonesia, Australia, Taiwan, Fiji, New Zealand, South Korea, Scotland, Vietnam. Okay. And you see, we have Malaysia with an emoji, which is even better. Okay. If you see your country and you didn't vote, it gets bigger. So, so as you can see, we are from everywhere. Super. Because I don't see you vibing the music, you can sit down. Okay. So we will continue our conference with an even more experimental thing. Okay. As you said, we as a global network, we do a lot of experiments. We try to be at the forefront of technology. And one thing, in order to succeed into the innovation, is to try and of course to fail many times in order to get the result. So we try different types of engagement. We already have a metaverse. I will give you some details as regards spatial.io, and the app is the app, the official app of the conference. You can log in there, you go into landscape mode, and you have some kind of remote control, and you can move your avatar. It's also from the web, it's also from an Oculus. If you have one, you can log in from an Oculus and see the actual live environment. Is a floating island. Okay, we went big, but it's okay. And inside there, you can do many things. One of the things that you can do is also have conversations, have a lot of meetings. So we create a space in order to have a global panel. The problem with the global panels is that when you have global invites from around the world, in one part of the world is 2 o'clock a.m., yeah, in the other 7, in some other is 10 p.m. So we have different time zones. In the metaverse, we can have what we call internet time. It's live, it's there, 24 hours, and of course we can have sorts of kinds of conversations about our topics. We are going to present you a really small snapshot of a global panel about the metaverse. We are going to upload this global panel online to our social media to watch the whole conversation. But here is 10 minutes of a snapshot. I tell you that is experimental, but we are getting there. So can I have the panel? Yeah. Can I have a round of applause?
I approach the metaverse probably in a very open and very broad way, and actually, I don't define it so much as I explore it and allow ask people around me what they're doing in what they consider to be the metaverse. So for me, you know, for a lot of people, they may look at spatial, for example, this room, and say this is the metaverse. And some people may argue, well, no, because it's not on the blockchain. entirely, it's not the metaverse, or because it's not inoperable with other virtual worlds, it's not the metaverse. And they have all these conditions that they want to apply, and that's fair. A definition is about cutting away and distinguishing one thing from another. In my own approach, I'm interested in the entirety of the digital architecture, systems, structures, and organizations, and how they intersect with our lives. And so I don't feel myself that the metaverse has to be defined, confined to a VR room like the one we're in right now. It is that we can interact and intersect with the metaverse in multiple different ways. And so that's how I approach it.
Give a more broad definition in order to cover it up and actually understanding the whole thing. I use in my keynotes an example using technologies. So for me, metaverse is like a whole block of technologies. And right now, with this whole generative AI buzz, there is also including AI. So, of course, as Constantino said, AI and metaverse are two different things, but from the perspective of the technologies, AI now is in the tech stack of the metaverse and virtual world, because with generative AI, we can be super fast in creating virtual worlds. We can have better 3D assets. So if we put AI and if we put 3D virtual worlds and the social element that you already, Alec, mentioned, and also the connectivity and the whole underlying assets of centralized or decentralized worlds, I think that we have the metaverse, and it's okay. The metaverse, from my side, is a definition, really, really broad definition. No one can claim it because we don't have just one metaverse. We will have metaverses, as now we have websites, and the virtual world thing will mix with the actual world. We already saw great examples of mixed reality with the Oculus Quest 3. We see a lot of new hardware in the game. We are now in, as Costantino said, in a revolution type of stuff as regards the metaverse. We are feeling the vibes, and it's just not the hype. The reason that we do this panel is the exact that, to have some kind of historic evidence after 10 years that, as you can see, this was the metaverse back then. It's like seeing a Geospaces website or a really early browser right now as regards the metaverse.
The last 20 years, there are happening events that change, shift, let's say, humanity goals. We have events like climate change, recession, and the pandemic. And together with those events, we have also the evolution of technology. We saw the internet rise. We saw Web 2 and blockchain and alternatives on many things that happening in physical world. And also we saw the rise of influencers, the creators, that they don't need any more committees or someone to pick them up in order to do what they do. And right now, the generations that they raised in these 20 years, they don't have the same goals that the old generations had before, because they see the world as one. It's without time right now, and they don't have the same stereotypes. The old goals was about economical growth or national security, but today the people doesn't want. Um, they want sustainability, and they want equality, and they fight for social justice, and they want one world. They open the window and they don't care about what happened in the street next to them, but they care more about what happened to other countries, and they embrace the problems that happen in a bigger, let's say, in a broader way in the world than the small problems that they have in the neighborhood. So everything is changed, and the new generation doesn't, they can't solve their problems that they have with the current processes that we have in industrial economy. So the metaverse came to give solution to them. And as Alex say, everything in technology right now is mature to provide those opportunities to people. And what I said about the small kid, and I have a lot of examples like that, is just symptoms of what possibilities you have in order to use the metaverse in this way. Everything else are tools and elements and ingredients to do it. But the most important is that right now we have the ability to evolve ourselves in a different level, to evolve humanity in a different level. This is why we should do it now.
So as we are moving, and because this conference is all about you, I would not call you to stand up. We will do it later, again and again. But we want to learn more and more about you. We already see your avatars, but can I have a Slido? You are already in the Slido. So we have a question. And we are going to ask you what are you doing as regards the okay, we can go with this question. Do you believe that one day you will be all avatars? Okay. The ones that are saying no, I will find you. Okay? So yeah, because avatars is a general term, but come on. If it goes more for no, let me vote from the backstage. Come on, we can do it. Okay. We have 19 people losing, so I will just make a statement that when we are speaking about avatars, I want you to think about your digital self. I want you to think about all the data that you already have, all the things that you produce, all your data from your smartwatch, from your mobile phone, everything that you produce every day. And this can create a digital twin, something that it will be alive with you, but the instance is that is you. Okay, so when we are talking about are we becoming an avatars? We are already avatars because we have smartwatches, smartphones, computers, we produce a lot of data. This is why we are here, because these all data merging and go faster that we can understand. And we need to rest assured that we have the information integrity, that we have ownership, that we have control over wrong, and I want you all to get your phones and enter the Spatial in order to showcase live your avatars and have a physical moment, like digital and physical. Okay, so you have the app on your phone, Spatial. Okay, open it and begin. Can I have the actual DCN verse in the screen? I surprised the production team. I told them that I want the metaverse in the screen. I said, why? Okay, can we zoom out a bit in order to see the bigger picture? Okay, with this, with Spatial, you can also say hi to the camera, and you can use the chat as you already do it. Okay, okay, someone went really big with the custom. Okay, so with regards what we are seeing here, we are seeing actual people, but these people are also in a physical room. So we can do a meeting there, we can do a meeting here. But when your avatars are connecting with your data, with your digital twins, imagine having a meeting in the metaverse with your team while you are sipping cocktails with it. That would be right. So we are big part. You can work around it, okay? Okay? Right now, we have a daily live chat. We have 50 people live. I'm 0 seconds. Okay. So these things we see, and all these new technologies, imagine that we, in order to be and have an auditorium, have a gallery, and have these nice balconies that we build, and have all these actual metaverse real estate. Okay, I think you are doing really well. So, in order to have all that, we can actually merge these two worlds. This is our showcase. We have a gallery. This gallery is with the history of DCN. When we're moving forward with these galleries, you can have NFTs in the blockchain. You can prove that you were here by having a digital certificate that is written in the blockchain. You can have your avatar replaying the whole thing. You can have spatial computing and scanning the things that you like. I tried to scan the opera, but it was too big. So I said, okay, let's start small. But you can actually doing all the things that you want in a digital reality mixed with the physical reality. So I want you once again to welcome you in the DCN verse, and let's give a huge round of applause in order to move to our actual panels. So Nikos, it's you again.
Thank you. It was really impressive. It was really impressive. And I'm really happy that you have actually exploited and you can actually make further use in the following days. So our first panel, we are live, okay? We're not there. So it is about internet and democracy. Yes. So come out and come forward. I would like to invite actually the speakers because the first panel will deal with a main issue, which is about internet and democracy. How actually, what are the challenges that we face in a regional and global level in terms of governance, engagement, but most importantly, in policy challenges. So I would like to invite the speakers with whom I actually will share this panel. Thomas, please join us. Harris, Darika, Enrique, and Samantha. Where are they? Come over. Come over.
Do you have a presentation? Someone has a presentation?
Before we start, actually, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and which we actually meet today. The Golden Rule, people of the Aora, and pay my respects to elders, past and present. I would like actually to welcome our speakers, with whom we will actually try to address a very important topic related with the challenges that we face in all levels. Internet has been actually a major drive for change, but how do we integrate this change? What are the responses needed? And most importantly, how we can respond in a policy. I would like to thank my speakers, and I would like to introduce, instead me, because we want to make it as more interactive, I would like to start from Thomas. So please introduce yourself and say a few words about yourself. The microphone's next to you.
Hi, I'm Thomas Wood. I'm an associate professor of political science at Ohio State. I apologize for the accent confusion. Grew up in this country, now in America. Everyone. This has constantly that I know I both of them. So this information is yeah, it's good.
My name is I'm so banana. I'm working with IT Cemetery that focus on the unit behind the pilot. Okay, so my name is Nia. I'm from Indonesia and I'm a lecturer, communication lecturer at Yogyakarta University in Indonesia. My students, Nata Budayas, I'm from the Philippines, so I'm a doctor and the head of civic engagement there.
I'd like to start with the first question that is related to social media. And most importantly, do you think that there is a need for policy intervention? Do you think that there is a need actually to take some measures regarding on how we use social media?
Gosh, the approach the United States government is taking, I think its political and legal history of having robust First Amendment protections to Americans' use of social media. I understand it's very different to the way other wealthy countries treat their citizens' access to these media platforms. The social media companies themselves, with some recent exceptions, have proven pretty responsible actors, I would say. The pandemic was a good example to which they were able to course correct. I think the extent to which they saw that their platform was being used as a vector for misinformation. And then as soon as that was advertised to engineers, they didn't want to participate in that way. So every country will make a decision for themselves, but I don't think it's fair to say that the companies haven't proven themselves responsive to self-consider.
Thanks for the question. It's a lot that you answers can tell. Where I'm sitting at right in Kuala Lumpur, I think there are a few things that we need to take into account. Right? The first is that from our perspective is that the social media platforms share some examples. If you look at the 19th pandemic over the past couple of years, COVID disinformation was there, anti-vaccine rhetoric was left to circulate on platforms, and this obviously caused some harm to our society. Besides that, fraud is also a massive issue in the Southeast Asian region. For example, the head of the Malaysian Stock Exchange, he has been impersonated more than 60 times on Facebook, right? He has lodged complaints as a Facebook user and also to the authorities, and the scams are still continuing. So, and that raises the question, right? The natural question is, has social media platforms done enough? And I think the answer is a resounding no. But when we come to the subsequent follow-up question, that is natural flowing from that, what can we do about it? I think coming from Southeast Asian region, democratic norms is not necessarily as embedded within our governments and within our state as it is in the West. And what that means is that when we seek regulation, that could lead to censorship of opinions and thoughts that are not necessarily aligned with what the government thinks. So a good starting point I feel would be to increase transparency for social media platforms, and we can talk about that a bit later, I think. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, I would like to start with a question when we talk about the internet. So, like, if we ask what if the internet was among the country like the Philippines, Thailand, Myanmar, maybe Facebook. So I think when we think about like social media and then the internet, especially in Southeast Asia, of course the social media platform is the key factor, is the key platform for the communications. So I think that, and then we look at the landscape in Southeast Asia. I mean, we have to say that it's like, I mean, the political situation as a authoritarian regimes. When we have to look at the political landscape and then we look at the social media, the relationship between the political regime in the regions and then the social media platform themselves, I think that is when we talk about the global governance and then look at the Southeast Asia, what is the regional perspective when we can fit into the global governance, when we have to talk about the regulation of the social media, especially when we talk about the social media as a business model. And this is one of the critical things. And then we're going to talk about the media industry. And then it's also the business model. So that's how we can have the conversation when we have to talk about the human rights and the business. I think this is the one thing that I will start. Okay, thank you. So I will start with maybe the concept of the political economy of media if I want to relate it to Indonesia. So if we talk about the policy of social media platform, I think every country needs the policy for social media platform. But we have to look at the different context of every country. And in Indonesia, if we talk about the political economy of media, especially the digital media, we see that social media platform is platform that can provide us more space to speak. But nowadays, we see that the business figures in the past also play significant roles to take the social media platforms in Indonesia. So it's called platform convergence, and they also play important roles in making the policy. So the government sometimes also consider the interest of the business figures and also politicians in making the policy and regulation. And I think that's a complex question because at the same time we need the policy for social media platforms, but we have to acknowledge the condition in every country and every interest that considered in making in policy making. I think that's my question in this question. So in the Philippines, this is something we always talk about as well. In social media, we always see it as a double-edged sword. Well, it has become a major platform for civic engagement. For example, in elections, a lot of people have utilized Facebook to advocate for their campaigns, to do preview campaigns, and to do their campaigns, stuff like that. So, but at the same time, in social media, we've also seen that there's a lot of disinformation that's happening there. It could be from the atrocious, from the ridiculous claims, or it could be something as serious as, for example, health claims that could really affect how people, for example, view the pandemic or any health-related diseases that we're seeing. So it's been pretty difficult as well for news organizations because, for example, for Rappler, we're a third-party fact checker of Facebook. So when we're also working on fact checking these claims, and it's important to note that this is an added task. We're doing the reporting, the fact checking of our own stories that's needed. That's part of the verification process. But on top of that, we're also doing fact checking for the things that we see on social media. It's really an added responsibility for journalists. So that's one thing that we're facing right now in the media industry. And aside from that, we're also trying to battle for space in social media. We're fighting algorithms to have more eyes to the positive news. This is verified content, this is verified information, factual information that people need to make an informed choice. But with the current state of algorithms, it's very difficult, for example, for these verified information to be seen by the public, given how, for example, content that may be misleading or that can trigger an emotion can go more viral than maybe some basic information that you're releasing. So that's then one of the things that we have to do. We're competing for space, for eyes, and we're competing, for example, in entertainment, which shouldn't be the case. I think social media platforms should actually prioritize or at least fix their algorithms so that people can have easy access to verified information published by verified sources, especially this was especially seen during the pandemic when most of us were online. And as what our panelists said, especially in the Philippines and Southeast Asia, we really rely on social media, especially Facebook, for our information. So it's important for us to increase the access to that.
Thank you. I think that you all mentioned and highlighted very important aspects. And based on that, I would like to step in and ask you to come up and present actually the regional challenges. And let's start now vice versa. What are the challenges regarding the use of internet and regarding internet and democracy as it is seen from the region, from East Asia?
So in the Philippines, one of the major problems that we're facing is really disinformation and misinformation. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to also make sure how can we make fact checking or at least making people better trust media in our current situation. In the Philippines, journalists have been targeted online, so our reputations have also been discredited. So there's been a lack of trust, or there's a degrading of trust in the Philippines. So it's very important for us to build back that trust, not only in the media, but in information in general. So that's one thing that we're also facing. And one of the things that we're doing is we're really engaging with communities right now. We have to show them that reporters, journalists are real people. We have to explain again or to build that foundation of what journalism is about. It's not necessarily. There's a lot of misconceptions about, for example, what journalism is. A lot of people, because of that tax on journalists, they might think, for example, that journalists are out there to ruin the reputations of politicians or to attack certain politicians. But actually, journalists are there to hold these people accountable because those are the people put in place to protect our people. And people have to know where to make an informed choice about the policies that are being put out there. They have to be part of the conversation, not only as followers, but as participants of the conversation, the dialogue. And I think that's one of the problems that we're facing right now, how we can build back the trust in media institutions, communities. And this can't happen with journalists or media alone because our reputations have also been attacked. So it's really going to be a collaborative effort that requires the participation and the partnership with other organizations, not only from media but also with academia, with civil society, with legal organizations, and the youth. So everyone is crucial in this conversation. And aside from that, we're also trying to, in relation to this information, what we're also trying to do is to make sure we have to simplify or at least make it more relatable to people. Why fact check is important? or even at the very essence, why verified information is important in their lives. So not necessarily just focusing on fact checking, but the need for verified information. So what we've been doing is we're trying to simplify the concept and also see how that can be applied, for example, in daily setting. So we, like, for example, would use examples like, for example, we don't want to fall for scams, so we have to make sure that we're verifying the content organization that's posting this. We have to make sure that we're checking the number, and check all these details. So even those very basic, very small details can actually already impact disclosure of fact checking. So we're trying to use these simple settings, these simple examples to also make fact checking more relatable to people. We're also seeing that it's important for us to provide spaces or at least um, provide examples for people as to how they can participate in promoting fact checking, promoting the information that they receive in whatever space they are, whether that's, for example, writing fact checks or maybe even creating videos promoting fact checking or MIL, or maybe even, for example, engaging with, for example, if you're a lawyer, you can engage with other legal practitioners or groups so they can also create policies or advocate or maybe defend truth tellers or for the academy to engage with the youth or to advocate for specific changes for curriculum. So we're trying to especially emphasize that when we talk about debunking false claims, promoting fact checking, it's really not just limited to writing fact checks. It's really going to need a whole of nation approach. And it's always emphasizing that this fight will be a collaborative effort that requires the participation of everyone. So I think the first chance is about the media cooperation in Indonesia. So I believe that every country has unique cases and also Indonesia. So in the early 2000, Indonesia has been through authoritarian regime before, and in the internet also come into scene. And people in Indonesia view internet as a hope, I think, at the first. And I think I can say that also because in the concept of social media optimism or maybe technology optimism, we should see the benefit of the technology in order to use or maximize the technology that emerge in our country. I think that the first highlight, but as time goes by, the media, the business figures that have the giant media also take a part in handling the digital platforms. Uh, and if we talk about the democracy, I think we should reach the diversity of content and diversity of ownership. And it doesn't truly happen in Indonesia because at the end, only the business figures on the politicians that have power that so powerful politically, also handling and also have the giant media and also be a part of the digital platforms. I think that's the first challenge. And the second challenge is about the discrimination and subordination towards the minority groups. And it says also that the social media platform and digital platforms can help uh, the minority groups to challenge the traditional norms, I think. But nowadays, because our country will conduct the general election next year, so many politicians use minority issue to win the heart of the people in Indonesia. For example, like they spread hate to the LGBT community, so the people in Indonesia will vote for this politician. And also, because I have a particular interest in the woman issue, I think I would like to address about the online gender-based violence in my Indonesia. So, it's increasing. The case are increasing in the recent years, but no comprehensive policy about the online gender-based violence. So, if you talk about the sexual violence in Indonesia, we have a long journey to deal with the policy, with the law on sexual crimes, because of the interest of the many people. That's why it's very hard for us to make this policy happen. But and then I'm quite disappointed also because can we cannot only think about the offline gender-based violence, but now the discrimination and hierarchy also move to digital platforms, and I think it makes different from the offline cases, and we need to discuss or we need to think more about how we should tackle this issue. I think that, but I think as I observe in my country, there is no specific like concern about the minority groups only from the like the civil groups organization something like that. So I think we should address about the minority groups issue also in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you. That was
Hopefully for me that is will be short. So I think for me that I come from like job security training like for the society and the accident. So I think the one thing that I would like to highlight here is about the online harassment. It would include the online gender-based violation as well. So I think when we talk about the online harassment and then typically when we talk about the state-sponsored information overlation or we call like IO, like in Thailand we have the cyber security, we have like I mean the information population that is happening in the social media platform. So I think that that part that we have to see what happening in especially in Southeast Asia. And then we see that the government in the region, they kind of like cross learning tactics. Not only share like for the Myanmar, Thailand, like Indonesia, and the Philippines. And then the question back to the civil society, how we can have like cross learning tactic and to again back when the authoritarian regime is happening in the region is the one thing. And then the question is about like we talk about the Facebook, and then when we talk about oversight board, um, for the Facebook, and then we look at the representative from Southeast Asia, it's probably only one. That is a one thing that we have to discuss more in the region as a representative for the oversight board.
Okay, let's make this quick. Right? 2 points on regional challenges. The first, and I think most pertinent for me at least, is the question of how well trained are social media platforms algorithms at detecting harmful content in the hundreds of languages spoken in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Right? Uh, how well trained are they at detecting hyper local slang, uh, historical nuance, things like that? To give one example, one of the deadliest racial riots happened in Malaysia on 13 May 1969. Right? But the date itself, 13 May, that probably doesn't matter or mean much to many people in this group, especially if you're not from Malaysia. Right? So if someone would say, yeah, you're call for the 13 May on a platform that is not trained to detect that as hate speech, it is going to be left online and it can lead to violence. So the first thing that raises algorithms, how well are they trained to detect hyper-local language? The second, the content moderators that social media platforms employ, how well trained are they? They are earning a dignified living, I'm sure, and I don't mean to knock on them for doing what they do, but there is an overarching question here that we need to ask: how effective are their operations? What kind of training have they gone through? And also, perhaps most importantly, what kind of mental health protection do they get in the course of doing their work?
I'll speak quickly. Obviously, folks on the panel have way more experience doing really important work. I would just caution, as a social psychologist, I sometimes think trust is the wrong target to be thinking about. Um, uh, I understand the importance of feeling like you have the trust of the audience you interact with. It's not easy. Academics are subjected to a lower trust, especially in the United States among certain political groups. In experiment after experiment, when you take a misinformed person and you subject them to corrected information on a topic they hold very dearly, the correction works, and the first thing they do is they diminish trust in the person who provides them the correction. We have to sort of face an awkward trade-off. Do we want a well-informed audience to regard the media sometimes with skepticism because they're providing unlocked information, or you want an audience that trusts the media sources they're exposed to, but they're very rarely exposed to things that make them feel politically uncomfortable. So I'm not certain trust is the way to target how effectively global public is being informed.
I cannot stand out from the challenge about trust because I'm an academic as well. I will abstain. I consider I will actually put the word trust in the general context where I would include trust in institution trust, not just trust. And I think that we put it in many ways in it, underline actually the importance actually of inclusion, of combating stereotypes, actually dealing with hate speech, etc. But as we promised this to be a very exciting experience, we have a very active audience whom I would like actually to take up their question. Because we would like to step a step beyond and say, can each of you give some examples of how social media companies are helping to promote democracy? Because we are discussing more and more about the negative aspect. But what about the positive aspect? Aris, there's one about you spoke about scams. Can you talk about what access social media companies can take? The lines between privacy, censorship, and protections. What's your view on the third issue, Malaysia, loyalty, race, and religion? And what's your take on youth in Indonesia that frequently actually challenge? So let's start from positive examples of social media protecting democracy in the region as well. And then let's move on. Who would like let's start from the beginning. Yeah.
I can start for positive. That's how the social media platform, especially when we talk about public mobilization. I mean, in Thailand, we have the youth protest, the big protest in the 2020. Then we have to say that that's how it become the mass mobilization is a one factor that because of the media. And we have to think about like especially for the young generation and how we can use the social media as a public mobilization. They use a hashtag on Twitter and now they use TikTok. So I think this is a one thing, and then it is a for me that I have to engage with the tech platform as well. We can see some of the good initiatives from the tech platform, especially in the Asia Pacific, like Google. They try to sit down and talk and hope to see what I just talked, right? So, but at least like we have the conversation with the society in the Southeast Asia. I think that we can be, especially when we have a key situation like protest election. I think the tech platform is kind of like try to have some of the conversation with the society on the
I was gonna join y'all down here at 6, but I set it for 6:25.
many mechanism that can address the issue that never been talked before. I think I should tell about my own experience. So before becoming a lecturer, I worked at the women organization in Indonesia. This organization aims to eliminate the gender-based violence, and at the time we conduct a research about the sexual harassment and violence in campuses in college in Indonesia. And I also use social media platforms to disseminate my result. And also, this research has been used by many, not only the scholars but also many organizations to become a base for their activities. I think that's the where is it and then the last one talking about the election. I think social media platforms can be tools for the citizen to monitor the process of the election. In the election in 2019, we have like election guardian, kawal pemilu, And this also to tackle the hoax about the election in Indonesia. I think that's the benefit of social media platform because we have more space to speak, we have more space to monitor and evaluate about the process that happened in our country. I think that's all.
Thank you. Thomas?
I guess I would encourage folks pick an issue, any issue you want of global importance, and every 6 months or so, just go online and figure out if the global public is growing more informed or less informed on that question. Because otherwise, we go down issue to issue, like hotspots of things where the public is being very badly misinformed, become preoccupied with those questions. And on those big global questions, so the good ones to check are, for instance, the understanding of anthropogenic climate change, or confidence in COVID vaccines, the global public has really been steadily improving their overall accuracy. The COVID improvement, the confidence in vaccine improvement is really marked. You want an example in the United States, where the American public has been subjected to huge amounts of disinformation over the last 2 years about the integrity of the 2020 election. The president's own supporters have been steadily growing more confident the 2020 election was not stolen. So for those reasons, the most skeptical takes on the role of misinformation to provide systematically degraded public understanding of contentious issues is complicated. And the interventions that journalists are making, even when they come at the cost of diminished standing for the journalists, seem to be having a very powerful positive effect.
Samantha?
I also agree with the other speakers here. In the Philippines, we have seen how people have been utilizing social media to promote, for example, community and civic engagement. So they really utilize that for mobilization. We can see that in the online campaigns, not only we especially noticed this during the elections, but even before that, you can actually see there are a lot of online campaigns, especially led by the youth. Um, when disasters strike or when there are critical issues that are happening in the country. So it's a space for discussion. And at the same time, it's also a space for people to crowdsource and engage with other volunteers and other people who are interested to do something about the issues or advocacies that they're passionate about. So that's really how you can see how there's a really strong sense of civic engagement in the Philippines. So, yeah.
Thank you. Harris, can we go directly because there are a lot of questions and I would like actually to address them. Harris, I'm going to ask you these two questions. One from Brian. Harris spoke about scams. Can he talk about what action social media companies can take? The lines between privacy, censorship, and protection of people can be gray. And the second question is for Harris. What's your view on the three issues in Malaysia? Royalty, religious, and race and religion. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Let's talk about scams first, right? And what social media platforms can do. At the top of my mind, there's at least three things. The first is to address cases of impersonation, right? So if someone were to impersonate someone of public authority, obviously that's not necessarily free speech, right? Free speech should not be absolute speech, and people do have the right to privacy, and people do have the right to be not impersonated. So for the case that I mentioned earlier, where the head of the stock exchange in Malaysia, was being impersonated more than 60 times, and being linked to scam deals, things like that. Obviously, social media platforms need to address cases like that in a more timely manner. That's the first one. The second thing is also on at the user side to ease how users are able to report scams, to report harmful online information, things like that. So that would facilitate more people being more forthcoming about their reports. If the reporting function is tucked away, it's like 5 clicks away, it's 10 clicks away, and you need to fill up, a lengthy box where you need to describe the problem at length. No one's going to do it. Let's be completely honest here. You need to make the reporting function as intuitive and as easy to use as possible. Think of it as a 5-year-old trying to use it. If a 5-year-old can do it, then perhaps that's the best practice here. The third thing is for stricter verification processes. I've been very vocal about X or Twitter's revision of how they have changed how people are verified. Now it's a paid subscription rather than being verified due to your stature in the platform. So that has obviously resulted in cases where questionable accounts are passing off as legitimate sources of information. I've seen piece of information. I'm pretty sure any of you here who are on the X platform, know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Just overnight after the revision to the verification process, multiple questionable accounts came up, and we were also seeing the consequences now in the war in Ukraine, Russia, Palestine, Israel as well, where so many accounts are passing off as legitimate due to the blue check, are spreading disinformation. The second question on 3R. So for those who are unfamiliar with Malaysia's social political context, 3R refers to royalty, race, and religion. So that's oftentimes where the red lines of free speech is drawn, right? So I'm not sure who is asking me this. They're probably baiting me into something. So the cops questioned me at the airport at Kuala Lumpur. But let me just highlight how red lines for free speech, I think, quite legitimately differ according to country, right? So for a country that's a bit more conservative like Malaysia, then yeah, perhaps the red line should be drawn there. And if someone disagrees, there are legitimate ways to do it through elections, which are relatively free and fair in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Because we have 10 minutes left, I will go quickly in the next question, and I will keep one for myself. In a diverse democracy country, how can we ensure people from different backgrounds speaking different languages have access to verified content? Samantha?
So I think for what we've observed in the Philippines is it's been pretty difficult because in the Philippines we've seen how community papers have also closed down due to the pandemic. So there was difficulty with the funding, and so many community papers had to close. So that's one problem: the access to local reporting. Secondly, we also seen the closure of a major broadcasting company in the Philippines, which have regional stations as well. So what we've been doing is we've been training several local journalists who can actually increase local reporting, so more people can have access to content. We've also been working with several schools who can also help in disseminating information. What we've been doing at Rappler is we actually have Facts First PH. It's an initiative we've launched with news organizations, with several news organizations in the Philippines, as well as civil society, academe, legal organizations, business groups, and civil society. So the goal there is really to create a distribution network for facts. Because what we've seen is with these info actors, they have produced a network which has made their content more viral, reaching more audiences from different backgrounds. And given how that was the competitor, that was what we were dealing with, we felt like for verified information, we should also produce a distribution network for facts, because we shouldn't be talking in silos. We shouldn't just be talking to our own communities who are also maybe already believers, or maybe people who are often reading verified content. We have to expand. We have to reach new audiences so that people who need access to verified information see the content that we're producing, not only for us, but also other news organizations, other academe, other individuals are also working in this advocacy. So it's really producing this network, sharing audiences to expand our reach. And aside from that, it's really important for us to involve different local journalists to increase local reporting. So that's one thing. So I think that's very important for us to also increase the capacity, but also to have more people be interested in journalism, or maybe even be interested in the advocacy of MIL. So I think it's very important to engage with them and to make people better understand why journalism is so important after years of it being maligned, or all these misconceptions that people may have related to journalism. So
Thank you. Vicuña, what's the fine line between freedom of speech and the censorship when it comes to managing information online? We have received a lot of questions, so I will just
okay.
repeat it again. What's the fine line between freedom of speech and censorship? when it comes to managing information online?
That's a complex question actually, because if we talk about censorship in Indonesia, we will relate it with the law of electronic information and transaction. And as we know that at first people celebrate the freedom of speech. I mean, like we can express our political views and we can express what we have never imagined before. But nowadays, in Indonesia, we also face the challenge of censorship because of the law that I mentioned before. Every critics become defamation and what is it like persecution, something like that. So the fine line, I think it's very complex and difficult question. I think because I'm Indonesia and I think I have been skeptical about this about the freedom of speech that we have in our country because sometimes I have read a lot of cases regarding like criticize the government, but they end up being jail or something with the policy with the law of electronic transaction and information. So I will say that if versus I'm not sure about it, but this is a complex question because we have faced so many complex cases in our country, and we cannot fully exercise the freedom of speech because of the policy that still needs to be managed and discussed in the future. I think that's my question.
Thank you very much. Darika, online harassment, including the social media bullying. What is obstacle to provide awareness and avoid suppression?
Oh yeah, especially for youth and then the youth activists. Wow, I think another part that I'm working on for the project is about digital well-being for the young activists. So when we talk about like the well-being, especially the effect on the youth, and then for example like when they talk about the online harassment, like gender online harassment, and then sometimes we want them to take a break, right? I mean, to just away from social media when it's some critical situation it happened. But it's very hard to take off, like I mean detox or even to take a break. And then I think we talk a lot. We know the term about FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. We know a lot of the situation when we talk about the internet using it. Especially when it comes to youth, I think that the balance between like, to do the digital activism, but at the same time to do like their own well-being and then when relate to their security, I think is the obstacle for now to find the balance and then learn from them because I think that the technology has changed a lot. I mean, as a trainer, how we can learning from them at the same time. It's not just only the way that we have to tell them what should do and what should not do.
Thank you, Darika. Thomas, you spoke about trust in media. How do you think the media can work to overcome inherent bias in readers instead of pushing them further away?
Gosh, I don't think it doesn't. I don't think it falls to the media to play that role in a democracy. Um, you know, these big social institutions are being buffeted not just by the consequences of their own editorial choices, but by the decisions being made by political elites. So to be like journalists, I'm not a journalist, but what I understand of the way journalists are trained, they're trained to tell the truth. And so occasionally that will earn them the criticism of powerful influences in society, actors in society. So the extent that the media can be very cognizant of attempting to encourage an audience to feel a certain way about an institution, yet their ability to tell the audience the truth. I would strongly encourage journalists to focus on the truth.
Thank you, Thomas. Harris, are there technological solutions rather than regulatory ones?
Uh, I hope not, right? Then I'll be out of a job.
Uh, Technological solutions. Yeah, perhaps. But I'm not a technologist. I wouldn't know what kind of products are there. But let me just say that whatever technology that we use to address the harms that we face today, that needs to be based on the principles of equity, inclusion. We need to ensure that as we introduce more technology to address the problems that the initial or the earlier versions of technology has caused, we don't inevitably create more problems. I think that's just one of the things that I have top of mind. But as a policy researcher, I do strongly favor regulatory options, and that does not mean the heavy hand of the state coming down and clamping on free speech. There are ways that policy making can be very deliberate to approach the kind of online harm issues that we are seeing. And one of the main ways I think that can be done is by increasing transparency on what is happening on the platforms. I think that is a very good starting point for any subsequent policy making measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we enter into what I call the speed date, the last minutes of our panel. So the question is that it is open to everyone, okay? Whoever wants to respond, just take it. You will have only 1 minute for each question to respond, okay? In order to be on time. Despite that I'm an academic, I really focus on time. Other technological solutions, no, we spoke about it. What metrics do you use to measure the impact of your disinformation, misinformation solutions, and how do you gather the data? Who wants to take this one? Metrics. Anyone?
Let me just say something, if I may. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. 1 minute.
Okay. Coming from a policy background, right, one of the main tools that I propose are always going to be legislations. And front and center of my mind, day in, day out, is Blackstone's ratio. So the lawyers among us would know that it's a saying that it is essentially better to let 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent suffer. That is the principle which I base most of my policy recommendations on. And I think that is one of the matrices that I look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. How to make digital space safe for everyone? Cyberbullying, discrimination, disinformation. Shall we move into verified content in order to mix two questions? Because there's another question. Should platform companies require verification? Is it a way to make safer online environment? Three.
I think we need collaborate with every part of our country because I'm academician, so I would say that I will do more research about the safe space in the digital platform, and also not only research and publish and then end something like that. No, but I also include the civil organization, include the government about in the research, and also I will do like community engagement to make sure that everything is going to be better in the digital platform because recently I have conducted a research about the digital literacy on the hate speech and hoax and also the online lending illegal online lending in Indonesia, and I and the team also include all the hours and like include all the people who knows better about the issue. So I think the collaboration is matter for tackle with the safe space in the digital platforms. I think this.
Misinfos are often short and readable. How can we ensure an ordinary citizen who has no habit of reading a long article have access to true and verified content? A volunteer, Samantha.
So this is a problem we've been facing for several years already. But actually, it's been a challenge for journalists because of the short attention span. So we've had to do several multimedia executions, so delving into video, more visual content, also producing quick explainers, so it's more readable to people. Those are some of the things that we're doing, but also maybe I can share some best practices from Facts First EH. For example, we're actually involving artist groups as well in this initiative. And what they've been doing is they've been utilizing comic strips or or cartoons to create explainers of fact checks. So while we have the text content, they actually make a summarized version of it in cartoons, which are easier to understand, are easily shareable but they also capture the gist of the fact check or the story. So that's one of the things that we've been doing to capture people's attention, to make people better understand these the gist of the topic. But of course, it's linked to the full story, so they can learn more about it and get the full story. So it's been a lot of multimedia executions, both short form content, as in TikToks, like short videos, and also delving to more visual content, maybe graphics. So those are some of the things that we're doing. But aside from that, it's also important for us to make, for example, our in-depth stories more relatable to people. So it's really important to have also a summary that can make it easier for people to better understand it. So those are some of the things that we're doing.
Thank you. So as I said, and I will keep one question for myself because the question is actually what are the panel's view towards opinions that traditional media visits issue objectivity should be dismantled in favor of empowering civil citizen journalism. And as a moderator of the panel, I think that I should respond, hopefully expressing the whole panel. But being a professor in journalism and mass media communication, I consider that this question actually it lies among one of the most important problems that we face regarding disinformation. As we cannot have citizen doctors, as we cannot have citizen civil engineers, I argue that citizen journalism is a misleading concept. And it led actually in opening up the space to people that in one night they claimed that they were journalists without being obliged to hold the values of objectivity, accountability, and professionalism. So, as we cannot have a doctor calling himself citizen doctor, I do not accept the term of citizen journalist because we actually dismantle the professionalism that it is required, the code of ethics that it is required. So I think that going back to what the great panelists have argued, it is if we want to make a safe environment, representative one, in order to be able to tackle various issues, we have to start by implementing a code of ethics, not in the form of suppression, but in the form of regulation, not in the form of not allowing other voices to be heard, but actually allowing accountable voices to be heard. Otherwise, we are speaking about a jungle, and this is not what media represents. I would like to thank my panelists, each and everyone. You have been enlightening us, giving us actually a regional and global overview, and I'm sure that this discussion will continue. Thank you very much. A big applause. And we succeeded to be on time. Okay, this is a major aim of this conference.
So let's continue. Thank you very much for using Slido and using and putting comments. We can use Slido for other things, okay? So we can use it in order to communicate with the ones that more than 300, 400 people are already here. So you can use Slido to communicate. I saw really, really serious questions. So I want to lighten up a bit and say hi to my mom in Greece. I would like to invite on stage Charles. Where are you? You are here. A big applause for Charles. Okay, yeah, here's the clicker.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone. It's great to be here today. I'm not so jet lagged despite 24 hours of travel, so it's really good to talk to everyone from across the region. I come to this as a former journalist, think tanker, and now working in business. So I've kind of run the gamut. and it's really exciting to talk to folks about information integrity and all these things. So I just wanted to set the stage and really explain what I'm going to go through here and what my talk is about. So in short, I'm talking about trust in the digital age and why trust is so important, particularly trust in government. And this, in many ways, stems from a book I wrote that came out about a year ago that's all about promoting good governance in democracies and saying how can we as democracies from the United States to Malaysia and beyond make ourselves stronger internally? How can we be more resilient so that our people are more confident in democracy and that people abroad who don't necessarily live in democracies think democracy is the model for my country that I want moving forward? That's who holds the path to prosperity, not some of the maybe higher functioning autocracies that have posted double-digit growth rates, something to that effect. So this is really how I'll go through it here. So just off the bat, I wanted to set the stage and explain that the main bit of my research and my book and many of my discussions has been explaining why trust in government and democracies is so down over the last really 20 years. And you can see here, and this is just kind of cherry picking a few of which ones are down, but I mean, some of these higher functioning autocracies, so China, the UAE, post significantly higher levels of trust in government than many of the world's top democracies do. And in my estimation and kind of conversations I've had, that's really in response to this idea that people in China, people in the UAE, people in Saudi Arabia feel like those governments are working for them, that those governments are essentially delivering on the economic front in return for limiting their political participation, whereas Americans, French, Malaysians, etc., kind of feel like their governments aren't necessarily working, that their governments are not necessarily accountable, they're not transparent, and they're not delivering economically. So I just wanted to set the stage here and explain how concerning it is to me that trust in government is down in democracies and up in autocracies. So I know it's a lot of text, so I'll try to go through it relatively quickly, but thinking about why trust matters, on a baseline level, it's critical to the day-to-day functioning of any society, in an autocracy or a democracy, where trust is linked with higher levels of compliance, with paying your taxes, kind of basic things, following the laws. Crime levels are associated with lower trust in government, and of course in times of crisis, and in the US I think the obvious example was COVID, where because people don't trust the government so much, they were not particularly responsive to government edicts to please stay at home or to please get your vaccine, and that's certainly not a US specific problem. And the example I tend to use in conversations around the world, and particularly I think actually in the West, is asking this question of, well, in a time of crisis, if your country was invaded, and the US was invaded, we needed a draft. Could the US institute a military draft and enough people would actually accept it and not protest? And I think that is no longer the case. And it's indicative to me about the kind of problem of the lack of trust. So, sorry, there we go. So thinking about the breakdown in trust and really what's happened over the last few years, I think just to put it simply is that many of the world's leading democracies just see our levels of trust to decline pretty sharply, and while some autocracies are heading in the opposite direction. This state of play is very much a concern because I think the more distrust there is, the more disruptive politics you get, and the more disruptive politics you have in the United States, Malaysia, beyond, the less likely I think people in non-democratic countries are likely to think about our version of governance as a model moving forward. And this is just a very rudimentary poll, but I wanted to make this clear, and this is since 2021, and you can actually date it back a little bit further, but you can see that there's a pretty significant trust gap between some of these higher functioning autocracies and what we might consider some of the main leading powers of democracies in the world. And I think that is indicative of many of my concerns. So just really walking through the breakdown in trust and what's advanced democracies at this point have just much less faith that their governments are going to deliver for them economically than in the past. There's much lower confidence across the West in particular, but also South Korea and Japan, that their kids are going to be better off than they were. And that helps fuel this distrust, the sense that, well, the government might say that they're doing all these nice things on industrial policy, on foreign policy, but we're not seeing it in our day-to-day lives. And that fuels a bit of distrust off the bat. Accountability, and this is particularly true on data, is a big issue as well. And just anecdotally, in Washington, D.C. was hacked and there was no accountability, someone had my data, and continued stuff like that that happens, I think, fuels a significant amount of distrust in institutions and in the government. I think there's a sense of, well, why is my data being hacked by malicious and seemingly no one in the company is held accountable for not having adequate safeguards, or the government is not necessarily requiring them to have adequate safeguards. And I think that's a very, very key point on data. And disinformation and misinformation are kind of obvious ones as well, where I think the more that our speakers out here today and tomorrow who are much better versed on this than I am, but I think it's very obvious that many democracies don't actually have adequate dis or misinformation policies at the moment, where we don't really know particularly how to walk the line in terms of social media, saying how do we compel companies, social media companies, to actually better regulate against dis and misinformation while allowing for freedom of speech on all those things that we hold very much dear. So just thinking about digital, and I think I agree with everyone who said it before, I'm sure this is a theme that's going to kind of continue coming across, is that it's a double-edged sword. And I get asked this question by media all the time whenever I do interviews about democracy and about my book. The question is always, well, is technology good or bad for democracy? I'm like, well, it's kind of both, in the sense that decreased regulation of social media, and I think whoever on the panel raised it before, local language concerns are a massive problem, where when you've seen, particularly in, I think somewhere like me, I used to be a journalist in Southeast Asia, but talking about Myanmar, part of the reason there was such dis and misinformation around the Rohingya in Myanmar was because there are very few Burmese language regulators or folks who were able to kind of look at that social media and moderate it. Whereas obviously there are a lot of English moderators. So the joke I always tell people is actually American social media or British social media, as maybe messy as it is, it's actually the best version of Twitter that you're seeing. Where in parts of the world where there are fewer moderators who speak local languages, it can actually be much more disinformation, much more misinformation. So there are very clearly positives and negatives here, and it is a double-edged sword. And I think the authoritarian government's point is fairly obvious, where countries both with which democracies have close ties, other ones with which they don't, have very, very much have an interest in accessing citizens' data. I think there's a lot of interest we know from China about securing Americans' healthcare data, just to kind of wield it for biotechnology purposes, the disinformation purposes. These are all big concerns that I think serve to weaken trust in government. And on the positive side, there are some good examples, I think, in recent months and recent years, where since the invasion of Ukraine, I think the U.S. government, the State Department in particular, has been very active about what they call myth busting, in terms of being very active on social media, saying, okay, you saw this report from Russian state media that U.S. forces are doing something in Ukraine. Here are the facts. I think that's a very important first step, and you're seeing it now and again with the kind of other conflicts, other dispute areas. But governments are not necessarily just sitting back and letting disinformation spread. They're actually rebutting it. And in the case of Ukraine, there was a little bit of pre-butting it, where even before the invasion started, the U.S. government was saying, we know this is coming, we're going to put out more accurate information. So I think that's a very strong step. And in terms of just outreach, social media is a positive in that governments and politicians are able to reach people they just otherwise wouldn't reach, where folks who are maybe not politically engaged, the way their Twitter algorithm works, they're probably going to see a tweet from the president or from the prime minister at one point or another. As much as that they might be politically disconnected, having that connection is better than not having that connection at all, which I think was increasingly the case before social media. So I have a bunch of slides thinking about, well, how can we actually win back trust in the digital age? And many of these are digital focused, some of them are broader, but kind of bring in digital pieces. And many of these are very central to things I wrote about in my book, but also are a little bit broader. And the solutions are not exhaustive, but I hope they're kind of a good place to start. So I'll walk through them quickly. Communication is really critical, as I was talking about before, in terms of myth-busting these false claims both by foreign and domestic actors, and making sure that governments are speaking clearly, speaking honestly, and speaking openly. And I think that is often something that doesn't matter what country you're in. Capital cities tend to be a little bit of a mirage of the rest of the country, where it's very easy to sit in Washington and think you will pulse to the United States, but I think actually making sure that if you are crafting a communication strategy for the U.S. government in Washington, that you are engaging with local counterparts in Nebraska or Tennessee to make sure you're actually figuring out how to talk to your broader public. Private sector partnerships, I think, can be critical as well, and this is data from Edelman does the Trust Barometer every year, and for the last few years, business has actually been the only trusted entity across, I think it's 28 of the world's top economies, most of which are democracies, But Americans trust the private sector much more than they trust their government. That's true across much of Europe. I actually believe that's true across Japan and South Korea as well. And there's this interesting kind of anecdote that a political scientist did a few years ago, where Americans, when we get good public service, we actually just assume it's the private sector. Where when everyone got their COVID shot, I got my COVID shots very effectively in New York in a very nice government-run facility, but Americans actually think the government cannot possibly do something competent. It must have been the private sector. And I think pushing back against that by companies cooperating with the government when there are clearly shared goals. This is not about throwing money at problems and just giving big subsidies to companies that are not kind of working in national interest. But I think you have positive examples happening already in terms of things like semiconductor subsidies and working on maybe more digital projects in terms of disinformation and misinformation. I think would be a positive step as well. And transparency is very obviously critical, and I'm not the first one to say it, but thinking about, well, how can governments be more transparent about their decision making, and particularly when countries' economies are maybe not great, being more transparent about where government money is going? I think that is a very significant concern of people who are wondering, well, if I'm not getting richer, if I don't feel like my economy is working for me, what is the government doing with all of this money? And I think there needs to be much more transparency of thinking, well, how are we spending that money? It needs to be much more accessible online. And I think the example currently is US campaign finance data. It's kind of difficult, much access to get the digital friendly. And just working through a few more here, I think accountability is critical. And the one example, there was this whole example of the EU has pretty strict regulations of capturing banker patients. That was in response to 2008 of basically saying there's an intent to better understand what bankers are saying and better understand the decision making to avoid financial crises. Not included, not data that's included. And there's some pushes by, I think, a Czech politician who's trying to do this. But it's interesting because email. I use WhatsApp for work. And I think there's an interesting question of, and for the US government, for example, emails, White House emails are archived and can be accessible after the fact, free with information. That is not true of WhatsApp. Taking that step in the right direction, as would having secure account for things like data breaches, where it seems like my data is breached all the time, and it feels like the companies that are being breached are maybe not facing any fines or any penalties, when that might actually be a good motivating factor to boost their cybersecurity. And as we talked about before, I think outreach is a really important factor here, and digital outreach is really critical. And during the early bit of the COVID pandemic, the Biden administration did a really, really good job at this, where when they realized that hesitancy to the vaccine was very high among ethnic minority communities in the United States, they partnered with organizations like the NAACP to reach Black Americans to actually boost COVID uptake. They held webinars. They went on a variety of podcasts and TV shows that you wouldn't necessarily think to be policy oriented. I think Dr. Anthony Fauci went on a bunch of sports podcasts to reach audiences that he might not have reached otherwise. And that was a very strong step in the right direction. Literacy as well. I think there's a case to be made. This is less maybe a regulatory solution and more a little bit of a values-based solution, and one that we need to push our politicians on, but to be more diligent about sharing information. And politicians have very active Twitter feeds nowadays. Everyone is tweeting all the time, responding to the story they just saw 5 minutes ago like normal citizens. And I think it is on politicians and other elected officials and just sitting bureaucrats who might have Twitter accounts to be much more cautious about what they're sharing and making sure that they're not sharing fake news or false news or anything that might not be verified. That's one, I think, important bit that we might not have actually talked about too much. And just moving on, I think the standard setting bit is really critical, and this is very obvious across, I think, the Asia and the Pacific as well. We're thinking about when other partners or other countries who have very different visions of what the internet should look like, who have very different visions for should it be open, should we have data protection, should we not have data protection, making sure that the world's advanced democracies that are actually aligned in this, and this I think is many of the G7 countries and others, are working together to both set these standards at home, but also set these standards abroad. And that I think starts with being more active providers of some of this infrastructure and working to compete with other actors who would give better data flows to more remote countries, but might do it with less protections and more corruption. Cybersecurity is a very obvious one. I don't think I need to go into that too much, but better cybersecurity in terms of government databases, in terms of business databases, I think would serve to boost trust in government, which is obviously quite critical. And lastly, on the geopolitical front, this is slightly more difficult, I think, but I do think democracy should work with our non-democratic partners to push for similar goals on things like this, where I think about the United States having very close relationships with Saudi Arabia or with Vietnam, which are obviously non-democratic countries, but thinking about, can we convince them that some type of data privacy or some type of greater freedom of expression on social media is, maybe if it's not helpful to regime stability, it's very helpful to economic growth, where freedom of expression is needed for innovation, having effective data privacy is necessary for foreign companies wanting to come in and do business. So I think making that economic case to some of our geopolitical partners is critical as well. So I just want to leave with this on some good news, and as much as I've talked about trust in government being weighed down across democracies, there is actually a little bit of hope here, where during COVID, when governments stepped in and offered a lot of money and a lot of assistance, rolled out vaccines, trust in government actually spiked, where people realized that the government was doing something for them. The government was looking out for them and could deliver. And it spiked, and people realized this is actually a government I can trust. They're actually looking out on my behalf. And I think that came back down to earth because COVID receded and everything went back to normal, and you can't be in emergency mode or crisis mode all the time. But what it taught me is that people want to trust their government, and polls show it. People don't want to live under a government they don't trust, but I think governments and citizens need to work together on digital issues and on other issues to make sure they can better deliver. So I'll leave it there. I think I'm way out of time, but thank you guys, and I'm happy to answer questions now or later.
Yeah, just 1 minute. So, I have great news. We are going to take a break and get coffee. We have 20 minutes for the break in order to start early and fresh. So, see you in 20 minutes. Let's get coffee.